Hello, my name is Brian Kirsch, and today I wanted to talk to you about acquisitions. And I wanted to kind of add this into some of the other normal lecture pieces and little tidbits that I give. If you're not aware, VMware, which is obviously virtualization and cloud technology, they have been purchased by a company called Broadcom. Now, Broadcom is typically a network card vendor, very large. They do other semiconductors and stuff like that. But they're a foreign led company, but they bought VMware and they basically bought them from Dell. Now, acquisitions happen a lot within the tech field, and one of your challenges with this is the difference in cultures. VMware, being a California company, has a very loose culture, uh, very relaxed, people centric, things like that. Broadcom's not the same culture. It isn't. And what you're going to find is these companies, how they tend to mesh together or don't mesh. The other thing, and this is kind of why I'm bringing it up, is what changes for the customer. So if you were a VMware customer or used a cloud that was VMware powered, your licensing and your cost model was done one way. That's going to change. And specifically, a lot of these companies are going to subscription models similar to apps on your phone, which means you're paying more per year, less overall capital cost, but more operational cost. And this is going to change. It's going to change for VMware. So is their product development cycle. So is the R&D that they do. All of that's going to change, and not always for the best. And it can leave the customer in a kind of a weird spot, because when you go in with a vendor and suddenly you have to change it, and by that I mean, and this is going to sound weird, but you can't just simply forklift everything out and go into something else. That is simply impossible. It's very expensive, very difficult, and a lot of other things. It's not that it can't be done, it's just not likely going to be done. Now, with what's going on with Broadcom and the longer term effects, nobody knows. There's employees that are not thrilled about it, some that just don't know what it's going to mean. Some will jump ship, some will not. But that's on the internal side. And while I'm not saying that's not important, as a customer, you have to look at it, how does it apply to you? What was the purpose there? Broadcom has bought several other vendors, notably like CA Tools, and really didn't do anything with it. Now, it's possible a company like Broadcom could be looking to spin off software versus hardware, maybe roll some of those tool sets into VMware and make it a standalone not a standalone company, but more of a standalone entity. People don't know, and you never know when that's all going to be shaken out. Other big mergers, such as back in the day, HP and Compaq. Compaq basically just got folded into HP, and you don't find much of a trace of it anymore. Companies do this to gain certain assets and things like that. It can be frustrating as a customer, because you may go in with a company based on company culture, their tech support, their values, matched what your company is, and now all of a sudden it's a whole new set of values. That's an issue. What I would always say is always keep your options open. That doesn't mean you should run 5 different hypervisors or have 5 different clouds. But if you go in with just one, keep in mind that can change. And it can change from being bought to a new CEO that takes a company in a very different direction. Most of the time, we always like to think that companies go in positive directions. Sometimes they go in negative. It does happen. It's not ideal, but it does happen. So be aware of that, and that's when you're in IT and you're purchasing stuff. Maybe don't buy 100% of everything from Microsoft or Cisco or what have you. At least have some flexibility there. So in case something does change, you do have more than one source. And I would also recommend you do that, to be honest, with your career. If you are a lifelong Microsoft person, and I'll pick on them for a minute, and you know all their technology, that's great. What if the next job requires you to use AWS? Well, then what? That's like saying, oh, hey, I know Apple iPhones inside and out. And if you don't know a thing about Android, you may end up at a company where their standard platform is Android. You're not going to change that. So in your career, you got to be able to work with, a Brocade switch, a Cisco switch. I'm not saying you got to be an expert in the other vendor, but have working knowledge of it. Because you don't know what's going to change. You don't know if management changes. You don't know if a company gets bought. Change is part of IT. It is just the reality that we have. And we have to adjust to it. We have to be flexible to it. And if we're not, we may miss out on an opportunity coming down the road. We may miss out on a lot of things that we don't want to miss out on. So be flexible in the vendors you work with, because things change. The VMware purchase was a really big one that recently happened, and it's definitely worth noting and talking about as it affects the customers. But keep in mind, that's not the only one. There are a lot of acquisitions out there that occur a lot. It's a yearly thing. Somebody gets bought up by somebody. So as you work with the technology, as you buy it, as you quote it, just be aware of all that and how it can affect you as a customer and how it affects you as a professional. Because remember, if you're an expert only in one technology or one vendor and it changes or you go somewhere else, you got to be an expert in somebody else's as well. So make sure you're willing to bridge those skill sets across multiple things. Again, my name is Brian Kirsch. Thank you for watching.